Mountain man, do you fear me or desire me? Mail order bride asked, alone in the desert night. May of 76, I was standing on my cabin porch at 8,000 feet, watching a woman with city hands and killer's eyes sit on a steamer trunk with my name carved into the lid. She wasn't what her letters promised. No plain seamstress ever moved like that, all coiled grace and careful watching. And when she smiled at me, thanking me for the rescue I hadn't yet offered, I knew right then she'd either save my life or end it. 3 days later, I'd find the blood-stained knife hidden in that trunk. 6 days after that, federal marshals would surround my cabin, demanding I hand her over to hang. And by the time the snow melted that June, I'd have to choose between dying alone like I'd planned or dying for something that actually mattered. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the moment Jacob Two Horses brought her up that mountain, and the exact second I knew she was going to be the death of me. Jacob Two Horses came up the final switchback with two horses, his paint mare and a chestnut carrying the woman who was supposed to be my wife. I'd been watching them climb for the better part of an hour, coffee going cold in my hand, trying to figure out why my chest felt tight. Wasn't nervousness exactly, more like that feeling you get right before a storm breaks, when the air goes still and every animal on the mountain disappears into the rocks. The woman sat that saddle like she'd been born to it, but her clothes were all wrong. Too fine, too new, not a speck of trail dust where there should have been plenty after 3 days' ride. Her hair was pinned up proper under a bonnet that probably cost more than my winter supplies. And even from 50 yards, I could see her scanning the tree line like she was expecting trouble to come riding out of it. That ain't how a seamstress sits a horse. That's how a hunted thing sits. Ezra Callahan, Jacob called out, reining in at the porch. Brought you that mail-order bride like you paid for. I set down my coffee and limped down the steps, my left leg stiff like it always was in the mornings. War wound from Shiloh, badly set, reminded me every day I was getting old. The woman's eyes tracked the limp, cataloged it, moved on. Assessing, that's what she was doing, measuring threats and exits. Ma'am, I said, pulling off my hat. Felt foolish doing it, but my mama raised me to show respect even when I wasn't feeling particularly respectful. Mr. Callahan. Her voice was smooth as whiskey, educated. Nothing like the simple, plain letters I'd received. Thank you for your hospitality. I'm Lenora Blackwood. Except she hesitated just a fraction before saying the name, like she had to remember it. Jacob dismounted, helped her down. She moved like water, all grace, and when her feet hit the ground she swayed just slightly, not from tiredness, but from the altitude. City lungs ain't used to thin mountain air. I'll get the trunk, Jacob said, and I saw his eyes meet mine. A warning there. Be careful with this one, his look said. The trunk took both of us to carry, which was the second wrong thing. What seamstress travels with a trunk heavy enough for two men to haul? I felt something shift inside when we set it down. Metal on metal, sliding. I appreciate you taking the time, Jacob, I said. He nodded, laid a hand on my shoulder. 6 weeks, I'll be back with supplies. You need anything before then? He trailed off, glanced at the woman standing there watching us with those gray eyes that seemed to see straight through a man's skull. You send word. Then he was mounting up, leaving me alone with a stranger who was supposed to be my wife and wasn't nothing like what she'd claimed to be. We stood there in the mountain silence, just wind through the pines and the distant call of a hawk. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. But it was the dangerous kind of beautiful, like a lightning strike or a rock slide, the kind that makes you want to look even when you know you shouldn't. Your leg, she said finally. War wound? Shiloh, Union side. You got a problem with that? My father fought for the Union, died at Vicksburg. She said it flat, like she'd said it too many times to feel it anymore. So no, Mr. Callahan, I don't have a problem with that. I showed her inside. One room, fireplace, sleeping alcove curtained off with canvas, table, and two chairs I'd built myself. Wasn't much, but it was honest. Everything in that cabin I'd made with my own hands or traded fair for. She stood in the middle of the room, turning slow, and I realized she was memorizing exits. The door, the window, the gun rack. It's not what you expected, I said. No. She met my eyes. But then I don't imagine I'm what you expected either. Fair enough. You take the alcove, I said. I'll sleep by the fire. We can sort out the rest later. She nodded, started toward her trunk. I noticed she was still wearing gloves even though the cabin was warm, and when she bent to open the trunk, her shawl slipped and I caught sight of something on her neck. A scar, puckered and shiny like she'd been burned. She saw me looking, pulled the shawl tight. Mr. Callahan, I need you to understand something. Her voice had changed, gone hard. I'm not who I said I was in those letters, and the man I ran from, he's not the kind who gives up. Before I could answer, we both heard it. Horses. Coming up the trail. Multiple riders, moving fast. Her face went white as snow. He found me, she whispered. God help us both, he found me. I grabbed my Winchester from beside the door and moved to the window. Through the gap in the shutters, I counted 3 riders, maybe 4, still a half-mile down the trail, but climbing steady. How many men does he have? I asked, keeping my voice level. She'd gone still as a deer. Silas? As many as money can buy. That his name? Silas? Silas Ashford. Banker. St. Louis. Her hands were shaking now, pulling at her gloves. He'll tell you I stole from him, that I'm a thief and a liar and probably insane. And he'll have papers to prove it. I studied the riders through my spyglass. Lead man wore a marshal's badge that caught the afternoon sun. Behind him, 2 others. Could be deputies, could be hired guns. Hard to tell at this distance. He a marshal? I asked. No, but he owns several. I lowered the glass, looked at her. She'd taken off the gloves finally. Her hands were shaking, but they were also scarred. Burns on the palms, old ones, healed rough. The kind you get from grabbing something hot without thinking. Or from someone holding you down on something hot while you fought. What did you really do, Miss Blackwood, or whatever your name is? Eleanor. She said it quiet. Eleanor Ashford. I was supposed to marry him, and the night before the wedding I saw him murder his business partner. The riders were close enough now I could hear the horses, maybe 10 minutes out. You got proof? She pointed at the trunk. In there, his partner's journal, a pocket watch with blood on it. My testimony. And you ran. I ran. Her voice cracked. I took his money, bought fake papers, and ran as far as I could think to go. I thought, she laughed, bitter. I thought if I got far enough into the mountains, maybe he'd give up. Maybe he'd just let me disappear. I walked to the gun rack, took down my second rifle, checked it was loaded, handed it to her. You know how to use this? She took it like she'd held one before. Checked the chamber, tested the weight. My father taught me before he died. Good. I moved to the other window. Because those men coming up here, they ain't gonna be reasonable. A man who'd murder his partner and hunt his runaway bride across 3 territories, that ain't a reasonable man. Ezra. She used my first name, and something about hearing it in her voice made my chest go tight. You don't have to do this. You can tell them I forced my way in. That you didn't know. I can tell them a lot of things, I said, but I ain't gonna tell them lies. The sound of hooves on stone grew louder. They'd reached the final approach. I positioned myself where I could see the door and both windows. Eleanor took position opposite, rifle steady despite the trembling in her hands. For a woman who'd been sitting pretty in St. Louis 6 months ago, she moved like someone who'd learned real fast how to survive. When they get here, I said, let me do the talking. You stay back. Stay quiet. Don't give them an excuse. She nodded. The horses stopped outside. I heard men dismounting, the jingle of spurs, low voices conferring. Then bootsteps on my porch. Heavy, confident, the kind that came from men used to getting their way. A knock? Polite? That was worse somehow than if they'd just kicked the door in. Mr. Callahan? A man's voice, cultured, with an edge like a razor wrapped in silk. My name is Silas Ashford. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Eleanor's face had gone white as birch bark. I opened the door just wide enough to show my rifle. The man standing there was maybe 45, dressed too fine for mountain travel. Wool suit, polished boots, a gold watch chain across his vest. Handsome in that smooth city way that made my skin crawl. Behind him stood two men with dead eyes and tied-down guns. "Mr. Ashford," I kept my voice flat, "you're a long way from St. Louis." He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Indeed, I'm looking for my fiancée, Eleanor Ashford." Young woman, dark hair, quite beautiful. I have reason to believe she came this way. Lot of women come through the territory. Not many traveling alone with stolen property. His smile sharpened. "I have a federal warrant for her arrest. Theft, fraud, possibly murder. The marshal in Silver Creek directed me here. Said Jacob Two Horses delivered a woman matching her description to your cabin not 3 hours ago." Damn, Jacob must have been followed without knowing it. "I got a mail-order bride arrive today," I said. "Name's Lenora Blackwood, seamstress. May I see her?" "No." His expression didn't change, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "Mr. Callahan, I'm trying to be civilized about this, but that woman is dangerous. She murdered a man in cold blood, stole valuable documents, and has been evading justice for 6 months. I have legal authority to retrieve her." "You got a warrant? Show it to me." He pulled papers from his coat, held them up. They looked official enough. Federal seal, signatures, the whole works. Could have been real, could have been bought. With enough money, you could buy anything, including justice. "Now," he said, tucking the papers away, "I'm going to ask one more time, politely. Is Eleanor Ashford inside your cabin?" I met his eyes. Saw what Eleanor had seen, something dead in there, something that killed easy and slept fine after. "Mr. Ashford," I said, "I don't know who you think you are, but this is my land, my cabin, and my business. You want to come in here and look around, you're going to need more than fancy papers from judges you probably bought." The dead-eyed men behind him shifted. Hands drifted toward guns. Ashford's smile never wavered. "Mr. Callahan, I'm a reasonable man, but I've come a very long way and I'm not leaving without what's mine, so I'll give you until dawn tomorrow to reconsider your hospitality. After that—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. They mounted up, rode back down the trail about 200 yards and started making camp, close enough to watch, close enough to remind us they weren't leaving. I closed the door, barred it. Eleanor was still standing there with the rifle, tears running down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "God, Ezra, I'm so sorry. I should never have come here. I should never have—" "You got anywhere else to go?" She shook her head. "Then you stay. We'll figure the rest out come morning." But neither of us slept that night, and when false dawn started breaking over the peaks, we heard them coming back up the trail. Only this time, there were 6 of them. 6 riders spread out in a loose semicircle around my cabin, just out of rifle range but close enough to make their point. Ashford stayed mounted this time, flanked by his 2 dead-eyed guns. The other 3 looked like they'd been pulled from whatever saloon had the cheapest rates, rough men with hard faces and the kind of desperation that made them dangerous. "Mr. Callahan," Ashford's voice carried clear in the mountain air, "I've brought additional witnesses who can attest to Eleanor's crimes. I'm offering you one final opportunity to avoid federal charges for harboring a fugitive." Eleanor stood beside me at the window, rifle in hand. Her face had that set look women get when they've made peace with dying. "Don't answer him," she said quietly. "Every word you say, he'll twist it. Use it against you later. Already planning on that." I checked my ammunition. 2 boxes of cartridges. Maybe enough, maybe not. Depended on how patient they were willing to be. "I know you can hear me, Eleanor," Ashford called out. "Come out now and I give you my word as a gentleman. Mr. Callahan won't be charged with any crime. This is between you and me, darling." "Just like it's always been." She flinched at the word darling. Her hand went to her neck, where the burn scar disappeared under her collar. "That's how he talks," she said. "Even when he's hurting you, especially then, always so civilized, so reasonable, right up until he's holding your hand over a lamp flame." I looked at her. She was staring out at Ashford with something harder than hate, more like the cold certainty you get when you've measured a man and found him wanting in every way that matters. "Mr. Callahan," one of the hired guns spoke up now, "we ain't got quarrel with you, but we've been riding 3 days, and we're tired, and we're getting paid to bring that woman back. One way or another, we're taking her. Question is whether you're going to be alive when we do it. Now that's more honest, I muttered. Eleanor's hand found my arm. Ezra, you can still walk away from this. Tell them I held you at gunpoint. Tell them whatever you need to tell them. I won't. I can't let you die for me. Ain't planning on dying. I moved to the gun rack, started loading my spare rifles, planning on making them reconsider the price they're getting paid. 6 against 1, 6 against 2, I corrected. You can shoot, you said. Time to prove it. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I've never killed anyone. Might not have to. Most men, you shoot near them a few times, they start remembering they got families back home. It's the true believers you got to worry about, the ones who think money's worth more than breathing. A shout from outside. One of the hired guns was riding closer, white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. They want to parley, Eleanor said. They want to get a better look at our defenses. But I opened the door a crack, rifle visible. Say your piece. The rider stopped about 30 yards out. Young fellow, couldn't be more than 25. Had that lean, hungry look of a man who'd been poor his whole life and saw this job as his way out. Mr. Ashford's offering $500 if you hand over the woman. No questions asked. You can say she overpowered you, whatever story you want. $500, and we ride away. You never see us again. $500. That was 2 years' worth of trapping. Could buy supplies, expand the cabin, maybe even hire help for the hard winters. And if I don't take it? The young man's face went carefully blank. Then Mr. Ashford says we come in and get her. And whatever happens to you, well, that's just unfortunate necessity. You believe that? I asked. You believe a man who'd chase a woman halfway across the country and threaten to kill anyone who helps her? You believe he's just going to let me walk away after? The young man's jaw worked. Some part of him knew the truth. I could see it. But $500 was $500. I believe Mr. Ashford pays what he promises, he said finally. I'm sure he does. Now get off my land before I put a bullet through that white flag. He wheeled his horse and rode back. I watched them confer, Ashford gesturing, the hired guns nodding, making plans. Eleanor was pulling back the canvas curtain to the alcove, dragging out her trunk. What are you doing? Showing you why he wants me dead so badly. She knelt, worked the false bottom loose. Inside, a leather journal, a gold pocket watch with a shattered face, and a stack of papers covered in tight handwriting. Robert Morrison's journal, she said, holding up the book. Silas's business partner. He documented everything, the railway fraud, the bribes, the embezzlement, $2 million stolen from investors. When Robert threatened to expose it all, Silas killed him. She held up the watch. Dark stains crusted the mechanism. I took this from Robert's body. And this? She pulled out a knife wrapped in oilcloth. Is what Silas used to kill him. I grabbed it without thinking. Just evidence. Proof. I took the journal, flipped through pages of careful accounting, dates, amounts, names I recognized, senators, judges, railroad executives. This wasn't just murder. This was a web of corruption that went all the way to Washington. Sweet Jesus, I breathed. You're not just a witness. You're carrying enough evidence to destroy half the powerful men west of the Mississippi. I know. Her voice was steady now. That's why he'll never stop. Why he can't afford to let me testify. It's not about me anymore, Ezra. It's about protecting $2 million and a dozen careers built on stolen money. Outside, the men were mounting up, not leaving, positioning. 3 to the front, 2 flanking wide to the sides, 1 heading around back. They're going to try to burn us out, I said. Eleanor checked her rifle. Then we better make sure they regret it. We took our positions, me at the front window, her at the side. The morning sun was climbing higher, making the snow on the peaks gleam like knives. The first shot came without warning, punched through the shutter, buried itself in the far wall. Eleanor returned fire, calm, measured, dropped the man who'd fired. He went down screaming, clutching his shoulder. Jesus! One of the hired guns yelled. She hit Jimmy! That's the point, Eleanor called out, and I heard something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Not fear, but cold fury. Next man who shoots at this cabin, I aim for center mass. Another shot, this one from behind. I spun, fired blind through the back wall where I'd heard movement. Heard a curse, the sound of someone scrambling away. Ezra! Eleanor's voice, sharp. They're lighting torches. I looked out. Sure enough, 3 men with torches made from pitch-soaked rags. They'd rush us, throw them on the roof. Cedar shingles would burn fast, fill the cabin with smoke, force us out. Shoot the torchbearers, I said. Don't let them get close. We fired together. 2 torches dropped, men diving for cover. But the third man, the young one who'd carried the white flag, he kept coming, arm cocked back to throw. Eleanor's rifle barked. The young man stumbled, dropped the torch. It landed in dry grass 20 feet from the cabin. Started spreading. God, Eleanor whispered. I didn't mean. You did what you had to. But my gut was tight. The kid was crawling away, leaving a blood trail. Gut shot from the look of it. He'd die slow if nobody helped him. The fire was spreading faster now, driven by morning wind. Smoke started drifting toward the cabin. If it shifted direction, we'd have the same problem the torches would have caused. Ashford's voice cut through the gunfire. Eleanor, you just killed a man. Is that who you want to be? A murderer like you claim I am? She pressed her forehead against the wall, breathing hard. He's right. You defended yourself. Ain't the same thing. But I could see the doubt in her eyes. The shock of realizing what she was capable of when pushed hard enough. That's when we heard the sound that changed everything. A bugle call, military and clear, echoing across the valley. I moved to the window, couldn't believe what I was seeing. Blue uniforms. At least a dozen cavalry soldiers riding hard up the trail, led by an officer on a gray horse. Who? Eleanor started. Army, I said. Fort Collins patrol from the look of them. Ashford saw them too, started shouting orders to his men. Cease fire! Put the weapons away! Now! The cavalry surrounded us all, me and Eleanor trapped in the cabin, Ashford's men suddenly trying to look innocent, the young gunman bleeding in the grass. The officer dismounted, walked straight to Ashford. Sir, he said, voice carrying that officer-class authority, I'm Captain William Shaw. We received word of gunfire and came to investigate. What exactly is happening here? Ashford's face transformed, smooth, concerned, civilized. Captain, thank God you've arrived. That cabin harbors a fugitive, a woman wanted for murder. I have federal warrants. Do you now? Shaw's voice was dry. He looked at the wounded man, the burns scarring the grass, the bullet holes in my cabin walls. Seems like an awful lot of damage for a simple warrant service. The woman is dangerous, Captain, armed and irrational. We were defending ourselves. With torches? Shaw looked at the discarded torch. Interesting defense strategy. That's when Eleanor did something I didn't expect. She opened the cabin door, walked out with her hands up, rifle left behind, stood there in full view of everyone, Ashford's men, the soldiers, me yelling at her to get back inside. Captain Shaw, she said clearly. My name is Eleanor Ashford. That man, she pointed at Silas, murdered his business partner 6 months ago. I witnessed it. I have evidence. And he's been hunting me ever since to silence me. Shaw studied her. Then Ashford. Then the wounded man. Well, he said finally, seems like we need to sort this out proper. Everyone's coming back to Fort Collins. We'll let the judge decide who's telling the truth. Ashford smiled. Of course, Captain. That's all I've wanted from the beginning. Proper justice. But Eleanor looked at me with eyes that said, we just traded one cage for another. And I knew she was right. Because the judge at Fort Collins was appointed by the territorial governor. And the territorial governor's biggest campaign contributor was a railroad executive named in Robert Morrison's journal. We'd escaped the fire, but we were riding straight into a rigged court. Captain Shaw had us mounted and moving within the hour. Eleanor rode between 2 troopers, hands bound loose at her request. So it looks proper, she'd said, meeting my eyes with a message I understood. Play along. Wait for the opening. I rode behind with Ashford's men, now disarmed and sullen. The young gunman, name was Jimmy Cord, turned out, was slung over a pack horse, gut shot and fading. Shaw had sent 2 riders ahead for the post surgeon, but we all knew the kid wouldn't make it that far. Mountain Justice was already working on him, slow and mean. Ashford rode up front with Shaw, talking smooth and easy. I could hear fragments carried on the wind. Terrible misunderstanding. The woman's quite mad with grief. Father's death affected her deeply. He was building his story, brick by brick. By the time we reached Fort Collins, half the fort would believe Eleanor was a hysterical woman who'd invented a murder to escape an unwanted marriage. Mr. Callahan. Shaw dropped back to ride beside me. You got something to say about all this? Depends. You already decided which story you're believing? His mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. I'm a soldier, not a judge. I collect facts, file reports. Other men make the decisions. Even when those decisions are bought and paid for? Now he did smile, cold as creek water. Especially then. Man learns quick in the army. You salute the rank, not the man wearing it. Judge Cornelius Hammond's been on the bench 12 years. Who am I to question his integrity? Even if that integrity's for sale? Shaw's eyes met mine. Mr. Callahan, I've been in 3 wars and 17 skirmishes. Seen good men die for bad reasons and bad men prosper for no reason at all. You think I got illusions about justice? He glanced ahead at Eleanor. But I'll tell you what I do believe. Woman looks you in the eye without flinching, walks out into gunfire with her hands up. That's either crazy or truth. And she don't strike me as crazy. So help her. Can't. Not officially. He lowered his voice. But I can make sure she gets to Fort Collins alive. After that, he shrugged. Army don't have jurisdiction over civilian trials. My hands are tied legal-like, but not moral-like. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, there's a Ute camp about 6 miles north of the fort. Trader named Jacob Two Horses runs supplies between there and the settlements. You know him? I do. Might be worth visiting. Man like that, he knows trails the army don't patrol. Understands mountain law better than territorial law. Shaw straightened in his saddle. Course, that's just idle conversation. Army wouldn't know nothing about prisoners escaping custody. He rode forward before I could respond, but the message was clear enough. Shaw was giving us a chance, thin as spider silk, but a chance. We rode through afternoon and into evening. The land dropped away from the high peaks, trading pine and granite for scrub oak and red dirt. The air got thicker, easier to breathe. I watched Eleanor adjust, watched color come back to her face as we descended. Around sunset, we stopped to rest the horses. Jimmy Cord was dead by then, just stopped breathing somewhere between 1 mile and the next. Shaw had him wrapped in canvas, tied to the pack horse. We'd bury him at Fort Collins, he said. Send word to his family in Kansas. Eleanor was sitting apart from the others, wrists still bound, staring at nothing. I walked over, offered her my canteen. One of the troopers started to object, but Shaw waved him off. Thank you, she said quietly. You did what you had to. Did I? She looked at the canvas-wrapped body. He was 25 years old, Ezra. Probably took this job because he needed money. Because men like Silas Ashford make offers that sound too good to refuse, and then point those desperate men at innocent women. The guilt ain't yours, Eleanor. It's his. She drank, handed back the canteen. What Shaw said to you? I heard some of it. The Ute camp? You got good ears. Prison teaches you to listen through walls. She met my eyes. We're going to run, aren't we, before the trial? You are. I'm just going to help you get started. They'll charge you, aiding a fugitive. You'll lose everything, the cabin, your land, maybe your freedom. Already lost everything once, I said. 12 years ago when my wife and baby died. This time, I'm choosing what I lose. There's a difference. Her eyes filled. Why? You barely know me. I lied to you, brought killers to your door, got you tangled up in... Because, I said, I've been dead for 12 years, just been too stubborn to lie down. And you made me remember what it feels like to have a reason to keep breathing. Before she could answer, one of Ashford's men, a big fellow with a scar across his nose, called out, "Captain, riders coming!" Shaw stood in his stirrups, scanning the horizon. I followed his gaze and felt my gut clench. 7 riders, coming fast from the direction of Fort Collins. Leading them was a man in a black suit, riding like he owned every inch of ground his horse touched. "That's Federal Marshal Thomas Decker," Shaw said quietly. "And he don't ride out personal unless somebody important asked him to." Ashford's smile could have lit the whole camp. Ah, reinforcements. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust. Decker dismounted, all business. He was maybe 50, with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen enough lies to spot them at distance. "Captain Shaw." Decker's voice carried that peculiar mix of authority and weariness. "I'll take custody of the prisoner from here. Sir, I have orders to—" "Your orders just changed." Decker held up papers. "Federal warrant supersedes military custody. The prisoner and all evidence will be transported to Denver, not Fort Collins." Shaw's face stayed neutral, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. Denver was 3 days' hard ride. Lot could happen in 3 days. Ashford stepped forward. "Marshal Decker, Silas Ashford. I'm the complainant in this case. I should accompany you to—" "Mr. Ashford." Decker's tone could have frozen whiskey. "You'll return to Fort Collins and await further instructions. This is now a federal matter. But I have a right to—" "What you have, sir, is a reputation for buying judges and bribing officials, which is why this case is being moved to Denver, where Judge Sarah Blackwood presides, and she don't take kindly to corruption." The blood drained from Ashford's face. "Judge Blackwood?" "The same." Decker looked at Eleanor. "Miss Ashford, you'll ride with us. I'm told you have evidence relating to the murder of Robert Morrison?" Eleanor nodded, too shocked to speak. "Good, because Morrison's widow filed a federal complaint 6 months ago. We've been investigating ever since. Your testimony, Miss Ashford, might be exactly what we need to close this case." Ashford's composure cracked completely. "This is a conspiracy. That woman is a liar and a—" "Mr. Ashford." Decker's voice went cold as mountain ice. "One more word, and I'll charge you with obstruction. Now mount up and ride back to Fort Collins. Stay there. Don't leave town. Don't send telegrams. Don't do anything but wait. Understand?" Silas Ashford, banker, murderer, man who'd chased Eleanor across 3 territories, stood there looking like the ground had opened beneath him. And for the first time since I'd met her, Eleanor smiled. Not a big smile, just a small curve of her lips that said, maybe justice exists after all. But I was watching Ashford's face, watching the fear turn to calculation, turn to cold determination. And I knew, the way you know a storm's coming by the smell of the air, that this wasn't over. Men like Ashford don't accept defeat. They just get more dangerous. As Decker's men cut Eleanor's bonds and helped her to a fresh horse, I caught her eye. Mouthed 2 words. "Be careful." She nodded. Then they were riding, heading east toward Denver and whatever justice waited there. Shaw watched them go, then turned to me. "Well, Mr. Callahan, seems your friend might get a fair shake after all." "Maybe," I said. But I was watching Ashford, watching him ride away with his hired guns. And I saw him look back once, saw the promise in his eyes. He'd lost this battle, but he was already planning the next one. And somewhere between here and Denver, on some lonely stretch of trail where federal marshals could be ambushed and witnesses could disappear, that's where he'd make his move. I started calculating distances. Denver was 3 days east. The Ute camp Jacob mentioned was 6 miles north. If I rode hard through the night, maybe I could reach Jacob, get word ahead, set up some kind of— "Mr. Callahan," Shaw's voice cut through my planning. "Army's got no jurisdiction over what a civilian does with his time. But if that civilian was to, say, take a ride north tonight, I wouldn't see it, on account of being very busy with paperwork." I looked at him. He looked back, face carefully neutral. "Much obliged, Captain." "Don't thank me. Thank your friend's courage. Ain't many women would walk into gunfire with their hands up. That kind of bravery deserves better than a rigged court or a lonely grave." He walked away, shouting orders about making camp, and I started planning how to save Eleanor's life. Again, I rode north through darkness, letting my horse pick the trail by starlight. The mountains rose black against the sky, and somewhere up there was Jacob's camp. Somewhere behind me, Eleanor was riding toward Denver with federal marshals who might be honest or might be bought. And somewhere in between, Silas Ashford was planning how to make sure she never arrived. The Ute camp appeared near midnight, a scattering of canvas lodges and cook fires in a meadow where three creeks met. Dogs announced me before I was halfway across, and by the time I dismounted, Jacob Two Horses was standing there with a rifle and a knowing look. "Figured you'd come," he said. "Need to get word to Denver, to Marshal Decker's route." "Already done." Jacob gestured toward his fire, where a young Ute man sat working on tack. "My nephew left 2 hours ago. Rides faster than any white man. He'll intercept Decker's party by dawn, warn them about possible ambush." Relief hit me like a physical thing. "How'd you know?" "Saw Ashford's men breaking camp, riding hard toward Thunder Pass." "And that's ambush country. Narrow trail, thick trees, good cover. They'll hit Decker's party tomorrow afternoon if nobody warns them." He studied my face. "You got feelings for that woman." Wasn't a question. I didn't bother denying it. Known her 6 days. "Mountain time moves different. You said so yourself." Jacob poured coffee, handed me a cup. "My wife. I knew her 3 days before we married. 32 years we had together before the fever took her. Some people you just know." I drank the coffee. It was thick and bitter and exactly what I needed. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait. See if Decker's smart enough to listen to warnings. See if Ashford's stupid enough to try anyway." Jacob sat down, motioned for me to do the same. "But while we're waiting, I got something to tell you. About your woman's story." "She ain't my woman. Yet." He smiled. "Robert Morrison, the man Ashford killed. He was my cousin's husband." I stared at him. "What?" "My cousin Sarah married a white banker 20 years ago. Her family didn't approve, but Morrison was a good man. Respected her people, learned our language, treated her with honor." Jacob's voice went hard. "When he died, they told Sarah it was an accident, but she knew Morrison, knew he was careful, knew something was wrong. She filed the federal complaint." "She did. And when your Eleanor ran, when word spread about a woman with evidence, Sarah sent me looking, told me to find her, protect her, get her to Denver alive." He met my eyes. "That's why I brought Eleanor to your cabin, Ezra. Knew you'd keep her safe, knew you had honor." The pieces fell together. "You set this up. I gave you a choice. You could have turned her away, could have believed Ashford's lies. You chose to stand up. That's on you." I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something like relief. This wasn't random chance. This was bigger than me and Eleanor. This was justice trying to work through whatever channels it could find. "Sarah wants to meet her," Jacob said. "The woman who witnessed her husband's murder. The woman who's risking everything to see justice done. If we make it through tomorrow." "We'll make it. My nephew's the best rider in 3 territories." "And Decker?" Jacob smiled. "I know Decker. Rode with him during the Apache campaigns. He's honest and he's smart, and he don't take kindly to ambushes. Ashford's men won't know what hit them." We sat in companionable silence, drinking coffee, watching stars wheel overhead. Somewhere out there, Eleanor was trying to sleep with armed men all around her. Somewhere else, Ashford was checking his weapons and planning murder. And here I sat, trusting in warnings and honor and the slim hope that justice might actually work for once. "There's something else," Jacob said quietly. "Something you should know about Ute law." "What's that?" "When a man protects a woman from death, when he offers his home and risks his life for her safety, that's a marriage bond in our tradition. Stronger than any paper or ceremony. You and Eleanor, you're already married by mountain law. You just don't know it yet." I looked at him. "That how it works?" "That's how it works. Course, white law don't recognize it. But white law don't recognize a lot of things that are true anyway." He stood, stretched. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." But I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Eleanor riding through darkness, about the moment she'd walked out of my cabin with her hands up, about the way she'd looked at me before Decker's men took her away, about how maybe Jacob was right, maybe some things you just know. Near dawn, I heard horses. Jacob heard them too. We were both on our feet, rifles ready, before the riders came into view. 3 horses. Jacob's nephew in the lead, foam on his mount's flanks from hard riding, and behind him 2 others, Marshal Decker and Eleanor. She slid off her horse and ran to me. I caught her, held her, felt her shaking. Ambush at Thunder Pass, Decker said, dismounting. Just like your man warned. Had 6 guns waiting. We went around, hit them from behind. Captured 4. Killed 1. The last one ran. Ashford? I asked. Still in Fort Collins, last I heard. But we found telegrams on his men. Instructions from Denver. Decker's face was grim. Judge Hammond sent them. The same judge who was supposed to hear Eleanor's case. He's been on Ashford's payroll for 5 years. Eleanor pulled back to look at me. It goes all the way up, Ezra. The territorial governor, half the railroad commission, judges, marshals. Morrison's journal documents everything. That's why they want me dead so badly. Which is why, Decker said, I'm invoking federal protection. Miss Ashford will testify in Denver under guard, and we're going to burn down this whole corrupt empire brick by brick. He looked at me. Mr. Callahan, I'd be obliged if you'd come to Denver as well. Character witness. Someone who can testify to what Ashford did, what he was willing to do. I'll come. Eleanor's hand found mine, squeezed. Jacob was watching us with that knowing look. Congratulations, he said softly. For what? Eleanor asked. For being alive. For choosing to fight. For finding each other, he smiled. And for getting married by mountain law without even knowing it. Eleanor looked at me, confused. I'll explain later, I said, but Decker wasn't smiling. There's one more thing. We sent riders back to Fort Collins to arrest Judge Hammond and detain Ashford. They arrived an hour ago. He paused, and I felt dread creep up my spine. Hammond was found dead in his chambers. Suicide, they're saying. Gunshot to the head. And Ashford? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Gone. Disappeared sometime last night. Left everything. Money, clothes, papers. Just vanished. Decker met my eyes. He's running. And running men get desperate. Get dangerous. Eleanor's hand tightened on mine. He won't stop. Even if we win in court, even if we destroy his business empire, he won't stop until I'm dead. Then we don't give him the chance, I said. But even as I said it, I was thinking, a man with nothing left to lose. A man who'd killed once and knew he'd hang for it eventually. A man with money hidden away and connections that ran deep as mountain roots. That wasn't a man who'd run forever. That was a man who'd circle back, who'd wait for his moment, who'd strike when we thought we were finally safe. We need to get moving, Decker said. Denver's 3 days. Ashford could be anywhere between here and there. We mounted up. Eleanor rode beside me now, Decker's protection official. As the sun rose over the peaks, painting the world gold and red, I looked at her profile and thought about what Jacob had said. Mountain law, marriage by protection and choice and shared danger. Maybe he was right. Maybe we were already bound in ways that mattered more than paper. But first we had to live long enough to find out. Because somewhere out there, Silas Ashford was planning his final move, and men like that, when they got nothing left to lose, they took everyone down with them. We made camp the first night in a box canyon with good sight lines and our backs to solid rock. Decker posted sentries in shifts, and nobody slept easy. Every snap of a twig, every owl call, had us reaching for rifles. Eleanor sat close to the fire, Morrison's journal open on her lap, going through the entries again like she was memorizing them for trial. You don't need to do that, I said quietly. You lived it. You saw it. I need to be perfect. Her voice was tight. One mistake, one hesitation, and they'll tear my testimony apart. Say I'm confused, traumatized, making things up. Eleanor. They killed Judge Hammond, Ezra. Made it look like suicide, but we both know Ashford had him killed. Silencing witnesses, destroying evidence. By the time we reach Denver, who knows what else will be gone? I took the journal from her hands, closed it. Then we make sure you get there alive. Rest comes after. She leaned against me, exhausted. Within minutes, she was asleep against my shoulder. I sat there watching the fire, one arm around her, rifle across my knees. Felt the weight of her trust, the responsibility of keeping her breathing. Decker settled down across the fire. You're good with her. Ain't much practice at it. Don't need practice for what comes natural. He poked the fire with a stick. My wife, God rest her, she used to say you can tell a man's character by how he treats people who can't do nothing for him. Miss Ashford couldn't offer you nothing but trouble. You helped her anyway. Wasn't looking for payment. I know. That's why I trust you. He looked up at the canyon walls, barely visible in darkness. Ashford's out there somewhere. Could be watching us right now. Could be miles away. But he's planning something. Men like that, they always got one more trick. You really think we can make Denver safe? I think we got a chance. Question is whether that's enough. We lapsed into silence. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Normal night sounds. But tonight they felt weighted with threat. Near midnight, one of the sentries whistled low, the signal for Ryder approaching. We were on our feet instantly, weapons ready. Eleanor woke, grabbed her rifle without a word. Decker and his men formed a defensive line. A voice called from the darkness, "Hold your fire! It's Marcus Thorne! I'm coming in unarmed!" I felt Eleanor go rigid beside me. Thorne, the Pinkerton who'd led Ashford's hunters to my cabin, the man who'd tracked her for 6 months. Could be a trap, Decker muttered. Could be, I agreed, but let's hear what he's got to say before we shoot him. Thorne rode in slow, hands visible, no weapons showing. He looked haggard, hadn't slept or shaved in days. When he dismounted, he kept his hands away from his sides. Marshal Decker, Mr. Callahan, Miss Ashford, he nodded to each of us. I know you got no reason to trust me, but I need to tell you something about Ashford's plans. Why would you tell us anything? Eleanor's voice was cold. You've been hunting me since St. Louis. Because I quit. Thorne met her eyes. 3 days ago, when I saw what Ashford was willing to do, bribing judges, ordering murders, trying to burn out a cabin with you inside, I told him I was done. He offered me double pay. I told him there ain't enough money in the world. So now you're helping us? Decker's tone was skeptical. Now I'm trying to make things right. Thorne pulled papers from his coat. These are copies of telegrams Ashford sent before he disappeared. He's got men waiting in Denver, not lawmen or hired guns this time. Professional assassins, 3 of them, best money can buy. He handed the papers to Decker, who scanned them by firelight. Jesus, Decker breathed. These are Pinkerton codes. How'd you get these? I'm still technically employed by the agency. Used my access to intercept Ashford's communications. Thorne looked at Eleanor. Ma'am, I'm sorry for everything. I was just doing a job, or that's what I told myself. But some jobs ain't worth doing, no matter the pay. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Then, the ambush at Thunder Pass. You were there. I was. You killed one of Ashford's men, saved Marshal Decker's life. Did what needed doing. Why? She asked. Why turn against your employer? Thorne was quiet. Finally. Got a daughter, 16 years old. Smart, brave, wants to be a teacher. When I watched you walk out of that cabin with your hands up, knowing you'd probably die but doing it anyway because it was right. He shook his head. I thought about my girl. Thought about what kind of man I wanted her to remember me as. And I knew I couldn't be part of Ashford's plan anymore. Decker and I exchanged glances. Eleanor's face was unreadable. How do we know this isn't part of Ashford's plan? I asked. Send you in to gain our trust, then lead us into another trap? You don't, Thorne said simply. All I can offer is my word and the information I risked my life to get. You want to tie me up, keep me under guard, I understand. But those assassins are real. They'll hit you in Denver, probably during the trial when security's focused on the courtroom, and they won't miss. Decker studied the telegrams again. These codes check out, and the names, he looked at Thorne, William Creed, John Bastrop, Samuel Cross. I know these men. They're the best killers west of Chicago. They arrive in Denver tomorrow, Thorne said. They'll scout the courthouse, plan their approach. You've got maybe 48 hours before they strike. Eleanor moved closer to me. I felt her trembling, not from fear, but from exhaustion and hope warring inside her. If this is true, she said quietly, if we know they're coming, we can prepare, set a trap of our own. That's what I'm thinking, Decker said. Turn the hunters into the hunted. He looked at Thorne. You willing to help? Really help. Because if you're lying to us, if this is some elaborate game, I'll personally make sure you hang alongside Ashford. I understand, Marshal, and I'm willing. Thorne's jaw set hard. My daughter deserves better than a father who enables murderers. So yeah, I'll help you catch these assassins. I'll testify against Ashford. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Decker nodded slowly, then held out his hand. Thorne shook it. Just like that, we had an ally. A man with insider knowledge, Pinkerton connections, and guilt eating him alive. Dangerous combination. But maybe, just maybe, enough to tilt the odds in our favor. All right, Decker said. Here's what we're going to do. We ride hard for Denver, arrive tomorrow afternoon. Thorne, you get us into the Pinkerton office. We access their files on these assassins, learn their methods, their patterns. Then we set up countermeasures. Guards in places they won't expect. Snipers watching the courthouse. Make it so they can't make a move without us knowing. And Ashford? Eleanor asked. Still out there somewhere, Decker admitted. But without hired guns, without corrupt judges backing him, he's just one man, and one man can be caught. I wasn't so sure. One man with nothing to lose could do a lot of damage before getting caught, but I kept that thought to myself. We broke camp before dawn, riding hard for Denver with our unexpected ally. Eleanor rode beside me, hopeful for the first time in days. You think he's telling the truth? She asked quietly. Thorne? I think a man who mentions his daughter like that, with that kind of pain in his voice. Yeah, I think he's telling the truth. People change sides. They do. Question is whether they change in time. I looked at her. But that's what we're counting on, ain't it? People choosing right over wrong, choosing honor over money. That's the only way any of this works. She smiled, small but real. Mountain law. Mountain law, I agreed. But as we rode toward Denver and whatever waited there, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something, that Ashford was planning more than hired assassins and courthouse ambushes, that somewhere in the shadows, he was preparing his final move, and we wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. The mountains fell away behind us. Ahead, Denver rose from the plains, civilization, law, justice, or the illusion of all three. We'd find out which soon enough, because by sunset tomorrow, Eleanor would take the stand, and by dawn the day after, we'd all be dead or free. No middle ground left. Just the reckoning we'd been riding toward since the day she sat on that steamer trunk and looked at me with killer's eyes. That night, locked in a Denver hotel room with federal guards outside, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the street below, Morrison's journal open on her lap. You should rest, I said. Tomorrow's the final day. I keep thinking about Judge Hammond, how they made it look like suicide. She turned a page absently. What if they try something like that with me? Make it look like I killed myself out of guilt? Not gonna happen. Decker's got men everywhere. Thorne's watching the Pinkertons. Jacob's people are on every roof. I moved to stand beside her. You're protected. Am I? She looked up at me, and for the first time since the trial started, I saw real fear. Ezra, powerful men don't go down easy, and Ashford's connected to people who make him look small. What if? A knock at the door. 3 quick raps, pause, 2 more. Decker's signal. I opened it. The marshal stood there with a telegram, his face grim. We got a problem. Eleanor stood. What kind of problem? The kind where the territorial governor just issued a pardon for Silas Ashford, citing irregularities in the arrest and detention process. He's being released at dawn. The bottom dropped out of everything. He can't do that, Eleanor whispered. This is a federal case. Federal case in territorial court, Decker said. Governor's claiming jurisdiction, and he's got backing from the Railroad Commission, the mining syndicate, half the business community. They're calling it political persecution of a prominent citizen. I felt rage building, cold and controlled. So that's it? He just walks? Not if we can prove the governor's taking bribes, too. Decker held up the telegram. But here's the thing. This order came through before the trial even ended, like someone told the governor exactly when to issue it. Eleanor's face went white. Someone in our camp. Someone who knew the timing, knew when we'd present evidence, knew everything. Decker looked at both of us. I need you to think. Who knew all the details of our case? Who had access to everything? We ran through the list. Prosecutors, court officials, guards, Pinkerton agents. Then Eleanor stopped, looked at the journal in her hands. Mitchell, she said quietly. The federal prosecutor. He borrowed this journal 2 days ago. Said he needed to review it for cross-examination. Returned it yesterday. She flipped to a section near the end. Stared. Then ripped out a page. No, not ripped. The page had been cut out cleanly, professionally. What was on that page? I asked. The entry about the governor. Morrison documented a $50,000 payment to the territorial governor in exchange for railroad easements. Proof of corruption. Her hands shook. Mitchell removed it. Decker's jaw clenched. Son of a bitch. He's been working for them the whole time, pretending to prosecute while sabotaging the case from inside. Where is he now? Downtown, probably celebrating with Ashford's people. Decker's hand moved to his gun. But not for long. We moved fast. Decker, me, 3 of his most trusted marshals, left Eleanor with Jacob and 4 armed Ute guards. Nobody was getting through them. Found Mitchell in the Grand Hotel bar, drinking expensive whiskey with 2 railroad executives and a territorial judge. He saw us coming, smiled like butter wouldn't melt. Marshal Decker, Mr. Callahan, join us for a drink? Decker slammed the missing journal page on the table. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, and conspiracy. Mitchell's smile never wavered. I'm a federal prosecutor. You can't arrest me. Watch me. Decker hauled him up by the collar. Enjoy your drink, gentlemen, because you're all next. The railroad executives ran. The judge sat there looking sick. We dragged Mitchell back to the courthouse, threw him in a cell next to where Ashford was being held for his final night, and that's when the real moment came. Mitchell looked through the bars at Ashford. I did everything you asked, removed the evidence, arranged the pardon. Where's my money? Ashford stared back cold as winter stone. There is no money. You were useful, now you're not. Mitchell's face went from confident to confused to terrified. But you promised. We had a deal. I had a deal with the governor. You were just the tool to make it work. Ashford smiled. And now you're the scapegoat. They'll charge you with everything, and I'll walk free while you hang. The prosecutor crumpled, started talking, gave up names, dates, amounts. Every corrupt official, every bribed judge, every piece of the conspiracy. By dawn, Decker had enough evidence to arrest half of Denver's elite. But Ashford's pardon still stood, unless we could prove the governor himself was corrupt, which meant one more witness had to testify. Not Eleanor, not Morrison's journal, but Sarah Blackwood herself, Robert Morrison's widow. The Ute woman who'd been gathering evidence for 6 years, who'd been waiting for this exact moment. And as the sun rose over Denver, she walked into that courtroom wearing traditional dress and carrying documents that would burn it all down. Your Honor, the defense attorney stammered, this is highly irregular. Sit down, counselor, Judge Blackwood said. And this time, she didn't hide who she was. My name is Sarah Blackwood, born Sarah Two Rivers. I'm Ute by blood and Morrison by marriage, and I'm here to testify about my husband's murder and the men who profited from it. She held up a ledger. This is my husband's personal accounts. The governor's $50,000 bribe is in here, along with payments to Judge Hammond, Federal Prosecutor Mitchell, 3 senators, and a dozen territorial officials. She looked directly at the gallery, where the governor sat sweating. By Ute law and territorial statute, I claim blood debt. Every man who profited from my husband's murder will pay, starting with Silas Ashford. The courtroom exploded, and I knew, finally knew, that justice might actually win. But Ashford was staring at Eleanor with eyes that promised one thing: this wasn't over. Not yet. The governor fled Denver that afternoon. By evening, federal marshals had him in custody at the Kansas border. By midnight, he'd confessed to everything, hoping to save himself from the noose. Ashford's pardon was voided. The trial resumed at dawn. Sarah Blackwood's testimony was devastating. 20 minutes of quiet, precise documentation of corruption so deep it would take years to root out. When she finished, even Ashford's lawyer had nothing to say. The jury deliberated 37 minutes, guilty on all counts. Judge Blackwood's face was carved granite as she pronounced sentence. Silas Ashford, you are hereby sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. Sentence to be carried out in 30 days. Ashford stood. For the first time since I'd met him, his mask cracked completely. You can't. I have money. I have connections. You have nothing, Blackwood said quietly, except the justice you tried so hard to escape. They let him out. He looked at Eleanor one last time, and something in his face changed. Not acceptance, not remorse, relief, like a man finally unburdened. Wait, Eleanor said, standing. Your Honor, I need to say something. The courtroom went silent. Silas Ashford murdered Robert Morrison. He hunted me across 3 territories. He bribed officials, hired assassins, tried to burn me alive. Her voice was steady. But hanging him won't bring Robert back, won't heal Sarah's grief, won't make any of this right. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. What are you saying, Miss Ashford? Blackwood asked carefully. I'm saying. Eleanor took a breath. Under Ute law, Sarah has the right to claim blood debt. And she can demand his death, or she can demand something else, something that might actually matter. Sarah stood slowly, looked at Eleanor, at Ashford, at the courtroom packed with corrupt men sweating their futures. Life in prison, Sarah said. Hard labor. Every cent of his fortune goes to the families he destroyed, the ranchers he drove off their land, the investors he defrauded, the people Morrison tried to protect. And Ashford spends every day of his remaining life knowing he lost everything to the woman he tried to kill. Ashford's face went pale. Death would have been quicker, easier. This was justice, real justice. Blackwood's gavel fell. So ordered. 6 months later, I stood on my cabin porch at dawn, watching Eleanor teach Tommy, Jacob's grandson, who'd come to live with us, how to track deer in fresh snow. The boy was 9 now, talking more every day, laughing like he'd never known grief. Eleanor wore a simple gold band on her finger. We'd married by both white law and mountain law. Jacob officiated, Sarah witnessed, and the whole Ute camp celebrated. She was pregnant, due in spring. Marshal Decker had been promoted, was cleaning corruption out of the territorial government one crooked official at a time. Thorne had quit the Pinkertons, started a protection agency for women fleeing violence, and Silas Ashford was breaking rocks in a federal prison, forgotten by everyone except the guards who watched him age into nothing. Eleanor crossed the snow to me, took my hand. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Taking in a stranger who brought you nothing but trouble? I looked at Tommy tracking through the trees, at Eleanor's hand in mine, at the sunrise painting the peaks gold. Not once, I said. Not even for a second. She smiled, kissed me. And we stood there together, 2 people who'd survived the fire and built something better from the ash. Mountain law, she whispered. Mountain law, I agreed. And somewhere in the valley below, I heard Jacob's voice on the wind, laughing. Told you, mountain provides. Now, I'm 87 years old. Eleanor passed 3 winters back, peaceful, in her sleep, holding my hand like she'd done for 40 years. Tommy's got grandchildren of his own who come visit their great-grandpa every summer, asking me to tell this story one more time. And I always do. Because it ain't just my story. It's every person's story who ever had to choose between what's easy and what's right. Here's what I learned on that mountain in 1876. Dignity ain't something you're born with. It's something you choose, every single day. When nobody's watching and when everybody is, Eleanor chose dignity when she ran instead of marrying a murderer. She chose it again when she testified, knowing it might get her killed. And she chose it one final time when she asked for justice instead of vengeance. That's the difference between surviving and living. Surviving's just breathing, living standing up when it costs you everything. Maybe you ain't got manhunts or mountain storms in your life, but you got moments. Moments when you gotta decide who you're gonna be. When you gotta choose between staying silent or speaking truth, between walking away or standing your ground. I hope, I truly hope, when those moments come, you remember this story. Remember that an old mountain man and a runaway witness chose the hard way, and it made all the difference. If this story touched you tonight, I'd be honored to know where you're listening from. Are you in your truck at 2 a.m., sitting on your porch watching your own sunset, thinking about choices you've made or choices still to come? Leave a comment. Let me know. Because these stories, they belong to all of us who still believe dignity matters, that honor counts, that love's worth fighting for. Until next time, friends, may the mountain test you, may you pass the test, and may you find your family waiting on the other side. This was Ezra Callahan's story, but it's your story too. Make it a good one.